You walked into the room and made a decision in under 3 seconds. You didn't know you made it, but you did. You sized up the person standing near the window, decided whether they were safe or suspicious, trustworthy or off, and filed that judgment away before a single word was spoken. That is not intuition, that is a system, and detectives have known about that system for a very long time. The question is whether that system is telling you the truth. Here is what professional interrogators, forensic psychologists, and behavioral analysts have spent decades uncovering about the human mind, and almost none of it is what you think you know. Start with the way you read faces. Your brain processes a human face in roughly 100 milliseconds. That is faster than you can blink. In that window, before conscious thought even arrives, your brain has already sorted the face into categories: safe or dangerous, familiar or foreign, dominant or submissive. This process is ancient. It evolved in a world where making the wrong call about a stranger could get you killed. But here is the problem. That ancient system was built for a world that no longer exists. Princeton psychologist Alexander Todorov spent years studying this exact mechanism. His research showed that people form confident judgments about a person's trustworthiness, competence, and even criminal likelihood from a single glance at their face. And those judgments are almost entirely wrong when tested against reality. Your brain is running a survival algorithm that was calibrated for small tribal groups, and it is applying that algorithm to every stranger you meet, every mugshot you scroll past, every defendant who walks into a courtroom. Detectives know this. The good ones train to override it. Now think about the last time you told a lie. You probably did something with your body without realizing it, not what you think. Popular culture has spent decades teaching you that liars touch their nose, avoid eye contact, shift their weight, blink too fast. None of that is reliably true. Research by psychologist Paul Ekman, who spent over 40 years studying deception, found that most people, including trained police officers, perform only slightly better than chance when trying to detect lies based on body language alone. The tells you have been taught to watch for are myths. They are behavioral folklore dressed up as science. What is actually happening when someone lies is far more interesting and far less visible. Lying is cognitively expensive. Your brain has to suppress the true version of events, construct the false version, deliver that false version convincingly, monitor the listener's reaction, and adjust in real time. That is an enormous amount of simultaneous processing. What skilled investigators look for is not a specific gesture. They look for cognitive load, signs that the brain is working too hard, pauses that arrive just before a specific word, over-explanation where a simple answer would do, the strange flatness of someone who has rehearsed their story so many times that it has lost the texture of real memory. Real memories are imperfect, they wander, they contradict themselves in small ways, they contain details that have nothing to do with the central event, because that is how human memory actually works. It records the whole scene, not just the relevant parts. When someone tells you a story that is too clean, too linear, too consistent, that is what investigators are trained to notice. But here's where it gets strange. The same cognitive load that reveals deception can also appear in an innocent person under pressure. When you are frightened, when you are being questioned about something you did not do, your brain activates the same stress response as guilt. Your heart rate climbs, your palms sweat, your eye contact becomes erratic. You start to over-explain because silence feels dangerous. You begin to look to an untrained eye, exactly like someone who is lying. This is called the Othello error, named for Shakespeare's Moor, who misread Desdemona's fear as proof of guilt. Forensic psychologist Aldred Free, who has studied deception for over 3 decades, has documented dozens of cases where the stress signals of innocence were indistinguishable from the stress signals of guilt. And when a detective has already formed a suspicion, which their ancient face-reading pattern-matching brain is quietly pushing them toward, they start to interpret everything through that lens. They call it confirmation bias. You already know that word, but knowing it and escaping it are very different things. Here is how deep it goes. Once an investigator forms a hypothesis about who committed a crime, their brain begins filtering incoming information. Evidence that fits the hypothesis gets weighted heavily. Evidence that contradicts it gets explained away or forgotten. This is not a character flaw. This is how human cognition works for every single person on the planet, including you right now reading this. Your brain is not a neutral data processor. It is a prediction machine. It forms a model of reality and then interprets incoming data through that model. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman spent a career mapping this architecture. His framework divides cognition into 2 systems: fast thinking, automatic, associative, emotionally driven; slow thinking, deliberate, analytical, effortful. The fast system is the one running when you size up a face in 100 milliseconds. The fast system is the one whispering to the detective that the man in the chair is guilty. Slow thinking is the override, but it takes energy, it takes intention, and under pressure, when stakes are high and time is short, people default to fast. What skilled investigators learn, the ones who get it right, is to deliberately slow down, to treat their own first impression as a hypothesis to be tested rather than a truth to be confirmed, to look specifically for evidence that they are wrong. There is a technique called the competing hypotheses method, used in intelligence analysis and increasingly in criminal investigation. You write down your theory,
Then you write down every alternative explanation for the same evidence. You stress test each one. You ask what evidence would have to exist if your theory is correct, and then you go look for that evidence instead of the evidence that already agrees with you. Most people never do this in their daily lives. You form an opinion about a colleague, a neighbor, a stranger on the internet, and then you spend the rest of your time collecting proof that you were right. You don't even know you're doing it. There's one more thing detectives know about you that cuts deeper than all the rest. Your memory is not a recording. You believe it is. When you remember an event, it feels like you were playing back a file, stable, accurate, fixed. But that is not what memory is. Memory is reconstructive. Every time you recall an event, your brain rebuilds it from fragments, and in the rebuilding, it can incorporate new information, emotional coloring, and details that were never there in the first place. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent over 50 years proving this. Her research showed that leading questions, subtle suggestions, and even the phrasing used during a police interview can permanently alter what a witness believes they saw. She called it the misinformation effect. In one of her most famous studies, people watched a video of a car accident and were later asked how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other or when they hit each other. The word smashed caused people to remember the crashes faster, more violent, and in a follow-up a week later, to falsely remember broken glass at the scene that was never there. A single word planted a false memory that the person then reported with complete confidence. This is why eyewitness testimony, despite feeling like the gold standard of evidence, is involved in the majority of wrongful convictions that have been overturned by DNA evidence in the United States. The witness is not lying, they are certain. They remember exactly what happened. Except they don't. They remember what their brain reconstructed. And their brain reconstructed it using pieces of real experience stitched together with suggestion, expectation, and the story that made the most sense at the time. Now go back to that moment you walked into the room. You looked at the person near the window and made a decision in under 3 seconds. You've been carrying that judgment sense. You probably believe it is accurate. You probably have reasons for it. Small things you noticed, a tone of voice, a look in their eyes, the way they held their shoulders. But here's what a detective who has done this long enough already knows. Those reasons came after. Your brain formed the judgment first, and then it manufactured the evidence to support it. You are not reading the world. You are writing it. And most of the time, you have no idea that is what you're doing.